Welcome to our series, MasterMinds, Lessons in Leadership. I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Linneman, where we discuss the intersection of strategy and leadership, the crux of what makes all great companies great. And joining us today is Roy March, the CEO of Eastdil Secured, one of the world famous real estate investment banks, and in all sincerity, Roy, one of the few true confidants to the industry's leadership. So, with that, Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Roy, it's a great pleasure to have you today, and I'm sure people will learn a lot. Eastdil Secured, originally Eastdil, has been through a lot of evolutions over its history, starting back with Ben Lambert, kind of a tiny private shop, and through all the evolutions up to today. And you've pretty much been on that entire ride, and a lot of it in a very senior leadership position. What do you learn? What did you learn about strategy and leadership as it evolved through those various parts of its life?
Well, the greatest strategy in the world is survival at the end of the day, and it's about surviving, adapting, and advancing at the end of the day. And kind of our mantra as a trusted advisor is to be calm, assess the challenges, look at the risks, be honest about them, and then look for the opportunity. And in every case where we've gone through a major downturn within the economy or within our industry, we've tried to apply the same principles that we give advice to others to maintain. We try to give to ourselves. And candidly, if you can't give yourself that kind of advice, you shouldn't be dispensing it to others. But for us, in 1980, when the firm, which was originally part of Blythe Eastman Dillon, which obviously the name Eastdill came from, was sold, the firm Blythe Eastman Dillon merged into Payne Weber. And at the time, they had a unit that was not dissimilar to the unit of Eastdil Secured. And so we ended up, Ben ended up buying it back from Blythe Eastman Payne Weber at the time, and ultimately we went our own way. Well, we didn't do that and buy it back because it was a good time to be buying it back per se. It was because we weren't going to get anything we didn't think measurably better in terms of the ability to be able to serve our clients than we already had. So we needed to have the flexibility to be able to do that. And then in 1986, where we had seen this burst of capital coming in from Japan, we were approached by Nomura Securities, which at the time was the largest securities firm in the world, and they were looking for product to distribute in their home market, but they needed structuring advice and they needed expertise around real estate. Well, we thought we had literally died and gone directly to heaven, first class, flat seat, international, if you will. And the idea is that we would find, the best-in-class partners to capitalize their projects with, in essence, securitization products that would be distributed to their high net worth and institutional clients. And we were the global, if you will, real estate investment bank for Nomura Securities, which, if you recall at the time, was actually the largest securities firm, financial services firm in the world. And so we were ecstatic about that opportunity and had no visions of it ever changing. We were relatively independent. They owned a 50% interest, but we maintained control. And we pursued our path. Well, along came, the big crash, the bubble bursting, if you will, in Japan. And candidly, they ended up having to pull in their tentacles and came to us and said, listen, we can't continue to do this. We've got to take care of our domestic challenges. Would you please figure out a way to, in essence, buy our interest back? And so it was as a result of that change in the counterparty and they're in essence not being able to contribute anything further to deliver to our clients. So we bought the company back, and then in 98, where life was just beautiful, 97, 98, until it wasn't anymore. We knew that, again, in the art of and strategy of survival, that we needed a port in the storm in case the markets turned upside down, because you can't give good advice if you don't exist. And so we began to think about ways in which we might be able to bolster our capital structure and to maybe partner with someone who could give us more that we could deliver to our clients. And at the time, it looked like it was going to be Bank of America. And then, if you recall that fateful May weekend when Bank of America merged with Nations Bank, Wells Fargo merged with Norwest, and Citi and Travelers merged. It was literally over the course of a 7-day period, 2 on one weekend, 1 on the next. And we literally were at a point in time where we thought we were, going to make that deal. And the winds went their own way, and then late summer, actually end of August, LTCM hit. Remember when Genius failed?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And the smartest guys in the room didn't anticipate something that was going to go outside the second derivative, if you will, of their models. And notwithstanding the fact that they were Nobel winners, they didn't calculate that meltdown. So we were nervous, needless to say, because the storm came before we could find the port. But along came Wells Fargo, who we had had a 30-year common law marriage and had done things with for eons. And they basically said, hey, look, we've managed through our crisis pretty well. We've got this Norwest partnership now. And we think we could bring something to the table. As you recall, they were at the time just a regional bank. They had total assets of about $220 billion, and they had about 20 billion in real estate loans. And they said, we think that 1 + 1 could equal 5. And so we then embarked upon a strategy. They bought the firm at the time, and we decided that we were going to go out and be able to deliver to our clients something that we never had before. And that was 1998, 99. And again, the idea was to build our firm so that we could provide better advice to our clients and be more relevant. And so each one of these turns, if you will, was a turn around trying to do the best job we possibly could for our clients and maintain our core focus, the North Star, if you will, around that. And then we had the opportunity, we saw that the markets were changing and that they were very frothy back in 2005, 2006. And we thought that the market might crack, and if they did, we wanted to be part of a team that had expertise in the NPL and distressed debt business.
And to that point, Roy, you had been much more equity focused rather than the debt, and secured had been more the debt.
Did debt and the distressed debt business, correct. So we figured that that combination was hand in glove, and then in the end, as it turns out, and we merged in, Wells Fargo was able to, in essence, capitalize that merger. And what came out of it was not just a combination of collaborative and complementary skill sets, but also intellectual capital that came along with it, leadership that came along with it, that candidly was a generation even behind me. And 1 + 1 literally equaled 3 at that point in time. Well, the market didn't crack the way we thought it would, and the government took over a lot of things, but the market cracked in the securitization business, and we were there to kind of pick up the pieces. So from 2010 through 2015, we did $93 billion of distressed debt that ultimately pushed us into the forefront of understanding not only capital structures, but having the product that our clients were looking for. And then in 2006, Wells Fargo ended up buying Wachovia, and with that, they merged the real estate investment banking and distribution business to Eastdill. And now we had kind of the full suite, if you will, of capabilities. And when you think about giving trusted advice, you really, there's a bias around what you're best at, and some people more cynically might suggest that there's a bias around where you can make more money. And the only way to counter that, candidly, is to be an expert in everything that you do and every possible outcome that might come along with it. And so this gave us the ability to really provide an end-to-end public-private, debt, equity, domestic, offshore combination that could truly, give clients the best advice without a bias in it. And so that was kind of, then the launching point of, what is now known as Eastdil Secured. And when you think about then those transitions, and you ask, well, what is the common theme in all those things? One, you're building towards a better platform for your clients, and two, you better have cultures that match. Because if you don't have those cultures matching, it doesn't matter whether you have the complementary skill set, because you'll never end up driving a collaborative environment like we have, which is, the unique aspect of our culture. And then, obviously, along came some of the challenges that the financial services industry faced, and with the regulatory environment, some of the technology limitations that were put upon us, notwithstanding the fact that we don't manage, accounts and the like, but we were under the same scrutiny as, what was now a $2 trillion financial services company, and there were severe limitations, firewalls and the like. And so we, in a very amicable way, and they had said from the beginning, look, we don't want to change your culture to the extent that our culture hangs over yours and impedes the way you do your business. Please let us know. We raised our hand, and we negotiated a very amicable exit, with them continuing to own a piece of the firm in a minority stake, which is what would work for them. And we brought in new capital that ultimately gives us the ability to stretch more internationally, and in particular with Temasek, the bridge to Asia and into China specifically. So each one of these transitions, candidly, and people often joke, boy, he still always sells high and buys low. The bottom line is our counterparty changed, and it was an opportunity for us to be able to actually supplement, build, adapt, and advance, what we do. By
There is a kind of consistency in its evolution that's not obvious to the outside.
No, no.
Bill, the culture comment was triggering to me. I know you and I talked about that a bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Roy, I don't think anybody can top you all as far as being a survivor and coming out the other end probably better than you went in. So kudos to you for that. But, as you and I spent time together, you've always remarked about how the culture at Eastdil Secured is unique. And in fact, I think you feel strongly that it really has allowed Eastdil Secured to, ultimately end up at the top of its game. Talk to us a little bit about how your culture has differentiated the firm and its performance.
Well, in so many ways, culture is the only distinguishing thing about our firm. And when you think about how the firm was formed, it was formed in the shape of a real estate investment bank. Ben, who founded the industry, literally looked at the incentives that were in the more traditional real estate services business, whether it was mortgage brokering or banking or investment sales, leasing and the like. And those were commission shops, whereas an investment bank looked at things through a collaborative lens. And at the end of it all, the determination is that you could get better collaboration when you had a common goal and you had common incentives. So the whole nature of it is that if you are trying to do the right thing for the right reasons all the time, and look at things through the lens again of decades, not deals, all for one for all, for the benefit of the client. If the client wins, the firm wins, the team wins, and if the team wins, the individuals who participate in that win. And I think that that kind of collaborative culture draws a different type of person to a different kind of professional to the firm. And that professional is looking for something more than just the financial benefit in what they seek. And they're looking for people who they trust. They're looking for people who they respect. They're looking for people who they can learn from. They're looking for people who they can teach. And in the end, in that collaborative environment, everything grows and it becomes a more fulfilling, if you will, outcome. And it candidly puts the firm, in a position to be able to deliver all the resources without trying to hash out, commission splits and things like that. And what it ultimately brings as well, there's a more fruitful reward that comes along with it. So people actually make more money doing what they do. They're rewarded more highly by collaborating, and at the end of the day, they trust the system that's going to invest in them at the end of the year. So it's a base salary plus an incentive comp, but it's a totally discretionary incentive comp. And we do recognize people for their performance, but the performance isn't just in executing a deal or finding a deal. It's how they're able to leverage off of that and their partners to deliver the best outcome. And it becomes very efficient when you think about the ability to be able to do $250 billion a year in capital markets transactions with less than 300 people on a global scale. You only get that through leverage, and you only get that through trust.
Right. And you get that from clients who give you big deals.
That again, it's got to
Trust
be
you.
creative and actionable ideas. I mean, just
Absolutely.
something in a commodity basis, you only deserve a minimum wage. And I'm notwithstanding the fact that Amazon and others are paying more this year, we're not looking to be paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
But by the way, you mentioned Ben as a founder and the culture he established. Ben Lambert, for
Yeah.
those who might not know, has been referred to. You had the challenge that I've seen a lot of people falter with, which is you not only succeeded a legend, the legend was there at the same time, and the legend was the founder. Why do some people fail at that, do you think? And others, you most notably, have succeeded wildly in that regard.
Well, I think to start with, you needed someone like a Ben Lambert, who's a compassionate, caring human being that had a great vision. And I often joke about the fact that, he knew exactly what time, who printed the train schedule, and he figured out when to be at the train stop exactly when the train would show up. And ultimately, he recognized that the real estate industry was changing from a locally financed, locally tenanted, locally developed industry into something that would be regional, national, and ultimately global. And so from his perspective, you kind of had to develop things within in his mind, an investment banking format to distinguish yourself. And, it's not necessarily higher thinking, but it's different thinking in terms of how to approach, a particular situation. And he by nature was just a warm, gregarious, charismatic, bigger than life type of personality. And
It's funny you say that, and I was telling you I was writing a little piece up on Ben, and I knew him well. I can't ever remember him not smiling. Now, I'm sure you saw times,
yeah,
but I truly could not remember Ben other than smiling
yeah,
or laughing.
yeah. Well, and and all the credit goes to him. And when I look around, candidly, anything that I've accomplished, in as modest terms as they may be, it's his DNA is in everything that we do as a firm and everything that I do as a human being. So, and we had a very unique situation. And it was less about how did I handle myself, but how did he handle himself. And I remember, back in 1994 when things changed and we bought ourselves back from Nomura and we became a full-blown partnership as opposed to what I call a benevolent dictatorship prior to that. It was only as a result of his willingness to kind of acknowledge that that was the way that we were going to hold the firm together, is by being a partnership and really legitimately being a partnership and allowing, in essence, the team to be part of something bigger, and having ownership in the company meant a great deal, but it also needed to be something more than nominal. So it was, his allowing that to happen. It was a necessity at the time because we didn't have anything to offer people other than ownership. There was no money. And so you kind of had to give them something to participate in and feel part of. And at the end of the day, when I kind of look back in the, when we then got to the later 90s, and with the Wells Fargo transaction wouldn't have happened without his 30-year relationship there. And so as I thought about us as a family culture, a collegial culture, I would often think, well, the way we actually treat Ben is the way we want to be treated. And anybody looking at someone who maybe was just over a little bit on the shadier side of their career, versus the base and sunny side of their career, that how we dealt with him, not only did he deserve it as a founder, but he deserved it as a human being, is where I ultimately came out on it. And so I would look at it early years and say, well, how do I want to be treated when I get to that stage, which is where I am today? And then I ultimately evolved to, what does he deserve, and how does he deserve to be treated as a founder and someone who gave his entire life to making sure these opportunities were available to us. So it was a pretty easy deal. And again, you've heard me say it. We were for 43 years. We didn't always agree on everything, but we never had a crossword or an argument. And we always, came to the same outcome. And I'd say it was 50-50 in terms of perspectives, oftentimes. But it was always with respect. And we were each other's life guides. We were each other's best friends. And at the end of the day, when you then treat the rest of your organization like that, that's the way you expect to be treated as well.
And Roy, following up on that, in all due respect, you are being extraordinarily humble. I said it in a heartfelt way. You are one of the great confidants to the industry's leadership. And I think the firm owes a lot to who you are as a leader and those relationships that you have built. So my hat's off to you for that. And I would argue your shoes are going to be hugely challenging to fill. And if somebody was to ask you, when you think about the leadership attributes of your successor, how much of it is going to be a reflection of your DNA, and are they going to have some other leadership strengths that are different than yours?
Yeah. Well, they're identified, by the way. So in terms of successor, I mean, there's a clear identification of who's next up, and I'm pleased to say there's a wave of them. And when you go through a transaction like we just went through, which is we're investing our own money in the enterprise going forward, you ask yourself the question, okay, if you're investing your own money, what does the value of that firm look like in 5, 10, 15 years? And do you have the right people who are coming up to be able to fill those shoes, the people who will fill my shoes and their shoes and so on and so forth? And I would say that, I often joke about the fact that I have an above average IQ, but not an exceptional one. I haven't been cursed with an exceptional IQ. And so I ended up candidly having to develop, much like a blind man who ultimately develops an intense sensory perception around hearing, taste, feel, sound, all the rest. I developed probably a higher level of EQ, or emotional intelligence, if you will. And then I was blessed to develop a little bit of SQ, and I'm still working on that, which is the soul quotient. And when you get to that point,
I ask you what SQ stood for. I didn't know, so thank you.
when you get to the point, EQ is sort of at the heart, and the SQ is even a little bit deeper. And you get to a point where you ultimately just you've experienced a lot, you've seen a lot, and you just trust your instincts, because there's very few situations that don't have some derivative application for something you've seen. But what I would say is, for a successor, they've got to be curious. They've got to have leadership, not just management skills, because in our industry, it's sort of like the second lieutenant coming out of an Ivy League school. They get fragged in the shower because they have no experience knowing what to do, but they're expected to manage and lead. And so I think you got to be a player coach, or else no one respects you, and nobody wants anybody to manage them in our segment of the industry, and certainly within our company. So you got to be a player coach. I think most importantly, you've got to be empathetic. You've got to understand, the people who are working with you, the people who are working for you, and ultimately your clients are the people who you work for. And if you sort of use that as the prism that you look through, I think that you're onto the right thing. And I believe that those are leadership skills and characteristics that somebody should have. And I'm blessed because I've got an executive committee that is made up of people. I mean, Jeff Weber, I've been in business with for 40 plus years. Jeff Scott, Jay Borsey, Mike VK, Steve Silk, Jeff Weber, as I say, and Jim McCaffrey. And these guys are just, leaders in their own right. I mean, just total icons and legends in their own space. And so you've got that, and then I've got this management committee that is, the top 18 people in the firm that we rely on for, and they're all coming from a product or a geography that brings us a different perspective around things. And then the wave of the next generation. So I know whatever those characteristics are, they're amongst and between those folks, and so I'm quite confident that what I would see in a successor exists.
Right. Well, it's a lot of who you are, right? So it doesn't sound like the talents are going to be all that much different.
No,
Well,
they're all
so that raises a question Bill and I have raised with others, which is what would your mother, father be proudest of?
you and I have actually had this conversation before, and I referenced it earlier about a picture that you thought should be my memorial picture because it best portrays who I am in one shot, literally. And I actually wore that tie today for you.
I know, I saw that. Thank you, thank you. And it's a
And
great picture. You
and
agree? It's a great picture.
so I think that my parents would be most proud of my kindness, and that's actually, if there was one word to ultimately describe me at the end of my life, I would love for people to be able to say he was a kind human being. And I
Wow.
think that if you start with that, it just kind of paves the way for everything else because you're coming from, a place of intention and honesty and integrity around it. And it's so hard, if you have that North Star, that compass point, it's hard to vary from it too much. And you don't ever have to try and cover your tracks or feel like, there are things that you should have done or could have done that. And by the way, it wasn't with me always. I mean, it's something that has come more and more and more to me over the last 15 to 20 years. And but I would say that if my parents would be most proud of me being a kind person who feels like I am serving others. And candidly, when you look at all the stuff we do, it's a little ridiculous, right? A bunch of digits running across wires and everything else, but the beauty and the majesty of real estate and the characters involved in it. I cannot believe that I actually get paid to do this. And I joke, as you have said, it's that couch that I carry around as a financial therapist is a heavy burden in many respects. But I love people and love being able to help people. And if I always tell people that the things you do outside and the what you get out of serving others, there's no greater joy.
Well, Bill, if I might, as a last question, I think we're running about out of time. Is that about right? You can't see it, Bill, but behind you is the word generosity above Bill's head. And you mentioned kindness. Um, would you talk a moment about March to the Top? I know what it is.
Sure.
What is it and what does it mean to you and
Yeah.
Barbara?
Well, it is a change in life for me, and it wasn't meant to be. And at some point, I'll tell you a little longer story about a canceled Jimmy Buffett concert that turned into my 50th birthday to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with my family. And and as part of that, I'd been in Africa a number of times, and I find it, one of the most soulful places on earth. Everything seems to make sense, as you know, Peter, once you've spent time there. And it isn't the animals necessarily; it's the landscapes, the people, and all that. But it just feels like it's right, and that's where so many things began, and how that circle of life works and everything. So I'm with my family climbing Kilimanjaro for my 50th birthday in July of 2006, and it's one of those things you do in solitude because you can't really talk while you're climbing, and it was a point of reflection for me, and I literally relived all 50 years of my life, and I literally had this enlightenment, this epiphany on the mountain. Well, just prior to that. I had seen something where there was a fundraiser for the Amboseli Elephant Trust that if people donated so much for each foot of Mount Kilimanjaro, they would take them on a safari. And so I said, well, why don't we do something for the people of Africa? Just kind of throwing it out there, saying we'll ask people to donate for each foot that we climb of Kilimanjaro, and then we'll try and do something with it. Well, sent it out 2 weeks before. The generosity was just overwhelming from people who just were touched by the fact that I was doing it and my family was doing it, and then we were actually going to do something. And then
By the way, I only pledged because I thought you'd wimp out after about 10.
Yeah, well,
I never thought it would cost me that much.
I won't tell you in a public forum what some of my partners bet on, but bottom line is I do have a picture.
More than you, Peter.
Yeah. But bottom line is that we then spent after the 7 days, we then spent time searching out things that we thought would be that we might be able to make a difference in, and what we found was foundationally, health, education, and conservation, and what we found was the gift of giving that came along with it, and the people who. Ultimately, you feel somewhat guilty, and Peter, you know this, you feel somewhat guilty about what you get out of it as opposed to what you're giving. And so it's become our passion project, and March to the Top's not that inventive, it's March to the Top of Africa, right, which is what they call Kilimanjaro, the roof of Africa. And it's basically been, I would say a soulful lifesaver.
Well, Peter, I think it's time to wrap up here, Roy. I very, very much appreciate your time and your input, and I think true to form, you've proven once again that a successful business is clearly at the intersection of both strategy and leadership. So we do appreciate the comments, and Mr. Linneman, always great to be with you as my partner. And we'll look forward to our next series of MasterMinds. And until then, be safe and very, very much appreciate the time and input. And you have a tremendous amount to be proudful of, Roy. So my hats off.
Well, appreciate the time and the opportunity. Love spending time with you guys.
Yep. Thanks again. Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.